Hello, class. As we continue on this journey of studying the Spirit, the one thing that I've tried to emphasize throughout the class is this connection between body and spirit, and in particular, as apostolics, that we should lean into the incarnation of Christ. And so, when we think of spiritual formation and spiritual development, this is an incarnational development. And so, for oneness apostolics, when we talk about the Spirit, we do not make a distinction between the Spirit of God as a distinct entity from Jesus or the Father. So, we don't have these distinctions in the Godhead like a Trinitarian might. So, when we talk about the Spirit of God, we are talking about God. When we talk about Jesus, we are talking about God. And for us, for that oneness aspect, that kind of brings it all together. And so to live a spiritual life is the same thing as saying living a Christ-like life. So to be like Christ is to be spiritual. It's to be like God. It's all one kind of ball of wax. And so what I wanted to do with today's lecture is we're going to take a look at the life of Christ, in particular, a particular habit that Christ has, and you see it played out throughout the text of Scripture as he's moving through his earthly ministry. Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 39 tells a pretty interesting story. And so I have here just kind of an outline of the events and things that you see taking place throughout the narrative. You see Christ teaching with authority. You see him casting out an unclean spirit. Then he goes and he visits with friends. He's healing a sick mother. And then after that, you see him healing the sick that were brought to him. So they start bringing him sick people. He's praying and he's healing for the sick. He's casting out evil spirits. And then right somewhere in the middle of the story, he just withdraws to a solitary place and he prays. Then after that, you see him being followed and sought after. He travels to the next town and he continues preaching and casting out devils. Now, what's interesting is in the Gospels, you will see a pattern that develops. The Gospels demonstrate Christ actively at work. We see him healing, casting out demons, traveling, teaching, preaching, avoiding fame, ducking persecutions, moving and going, being and doing. And as you can see from the chart below, mixed into all of Jesus' activity is a consistent pattern of prayerful withdrawal. 10 times in the book of Matthew, we see Jesus withdrawing. 10 times in the book of Mark, 9 times in the book of Luke, and 5 times in the book of John. Luke 5:16 in particular notes that Jesus often withdrew, suggesting these specific mentions are only a few of the times noted where Jesus takes time to withdraw and rest. You can look at Jesus' life and ministry, and we can find ourselves longing for the healings, the miracles, the powerful teaching, the ability to convey transformational insights. All of these things are noble. But if we long for the public aspects of Jesus' life, we may do so while missing out on the one thing we should be longing for even more. I'm going to pull in from my professional life a little bit here. And what you'll see on the slide here is an interesting map of the world. I was at a sleep conference. So if you don't know, my professional career, I run a sleep lab for the Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital. So I run a pediatric sleep lab, and I've been in the sleep medicine field for about 15, 16 years now. And so one of the conferences I attended, the presenter got up and had this map of the world placed on the screen to talk to us about sleep and the effects of sleep on society at large and our health in general. So what you see here is a light map of the world. And this was taken, I think what they said was like between 2 and 3 a.m. on every spot in the world. and it shows the artificial lights that were on in the world at 2 to 3 a.m. What you notice is the world, because of advancements, quote unquote, advancements in technology, the world is lit up, particularly at that part of the day when we should be sleeping. When we should be sleeping. We're a world that is constantly on the go, constantly doing, constantly producing. We're moving, and then we create technology that allows us to continue that moving. And my contention, what you see on this map here, is not just a world that is going, doing, and being productive. What you see is a world that is in spiritual rebellion. When we talk about the Spirit of God, there is a component of rest and Sabbath that is built into a spiritual life. It's part of the framework of walking with God. When you think about Jesus continually taking time to withdraw and rest, that's because he was engaging in a truly spiritual life. It's all intermixed. So here's the fascinating thing. As I guess I am technically an expert on sleep. I am a credentialed expert on sleep. It was interesting when I began to learn about how sleep works in our bodies. So essentially, when you fall asleep at night, healthy sleep, you're supposed to move through stages of sleep. So you move through kind of like a clock. You move through every 90 to 110 minutes, you're supposed to hit a dream period. So the way that you fall asleep, you go to stage 1, and it progresses 1, 2, 3, progressively deeper. 90 minutes in, you dream for a short period of time, and then you repeat that cycle. So a healthy night of sleep, you should be getting 3 to 5 REM periods a night. So that's 3 to 5 times that you hit the period of sleep in which you dream. So you go 1, 2, 3, dream, 1, 2, 3, dream, 1, 2, 3, dream. And then you wake up the next day and you feel refreshed and you're ready to go on your way. The average amount of sleep that's needed for an adult is about 7 hours of sleep. It varies. Women tend to need a little bit more. There's hormonal components that are involved here. But on average, it's still around 7 hours of sleep. That means you need to be in bed about 7.5 hours to get to 7 hours of sleep. If you're not getting 7 hours of sleep at night, maybe you don't need that much because it is an average. But if you're sleeping 10 hours a night and still feeling tired the next day, that's an indication that something is physiologically wrong with your body. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can't function without sleep. In fact, you can't live without rest. So in the sleep medicine field, it's much like the rest of the world. There's a lot of evolutionary bias and evolutionary frameworks at work. So the father of sleep was a man named William Dement. And their comment on why we sleep. And we really don't know scientifically, we really don't know why we sleep. His response was, the reason we sleep is if we don't, we get sleepy. But there's a lot of the scientists and a lot of the thinkers and a lot of the people behind the research that started the kind of the sleep medicine field there's a lot of evolutionary talk in there. And one of the statements I found interesting in my training period was they claimed that one of the biggest mistakes of evolution is sleep. Like, you're never more vulnerable than when you're sleeping. You're not active. You're ceasing and desisting from activity, placing yourself in a vulnerable state to predators. If a predator was to come upon you while you're sleeping, you are at the worst possible place to defend yourself if needed. Sleep just does not make sense from a naturalistic evolutionary perspective. It doesn't. My contention is it does make sense from a creation perspective, from an intelligent design perspective. it makes sense from the flow of the text of Scripture. You're never more ready and reflecting how you were created than when you are in a state of rest. You were created to be open and vulnerable in the presence of God, trusting that there is a God who is protecting and watching and there for you. And the fact that we sleep is a reflection of that reality. It's built into our DNA, it's built into our bodies. Sabbath is an integral, incarnated aspect of human living. Like, you can reject God all you want, but He's built your need for Sabbath into your body. And so when you look at this light map that's on this screen, what you see to me is a world that is in spiritual rebellion, that says, I don't need to rest. I don't want to rest. I'm going to continue to produce. And we're living and engaging in cycles of being and doing that is a direct rebellion to the way we were created. We were created to live a life of trust and reliance upon God. And vulnerability and rest is built into who we are. Now, what's interesting in the sleep field, if you're having difficulty sleeping, there's two things we're going to look at primarily. The first is your sleep hygiene, is what we call it. So what are you doing? What are your habits at night that might be disrupting your sleep? Are you staying up too late? Are you drinking coffee and caffeine before you go to bed? Are you waking too early? Or what are the habits? Do you have a TV on in your room while you're trying to fall asleep? Because that flickering pixels from the TV, even though your eyes are closed, it's going to disrupt your brain, and you're still picking up that flickering screen, and it's going to cause what we call micro arousals in your brain that keep you from progressing through your stages of sleep like you're supposed to. So we're going to look at all kinds of environmental factors to determine, is something environmentally causing you to disrupt your sleep or not give yourself enough time? Is your environment causing a disruption to your rest? Then the next thing we're going to look at is your breathing. Because the primary thing that's happening in your sleep, the one thing that disrupts most sleep, is related to breathing. As we age, I am learning that at 46, I now take up more space. I have more matter. I matter more than ever at 46 than I did before. I can tell when I'm hit about 208 to 210 pounds, my snoring increases. I wake up less rested, and I toss and turn more at night. If I can get that down to 198, I can tell that I'm sleeping better. It's reported that I'm snoring less. I have less dry mouth when I wake up, and I don't toss and turn as much. There is a direct connection between your breath, or if I could say it in Hebrew, your ruach, and your rest. So what we look at night when we're doing a sleep study is we want to see, when you fall asleep, is your airway getting restricted by excess tissue in the airway? Is your airway being closed off periodically, and as a result causing you to gasp and wake up for 2 to 3 seconds at a time? And those little gasps and that little waking up is fragmenting your sleep cycle, and it's causing you to feel unrested. When you're unrested and you're not resting properly, your ability to regulate your emotions is debilitated. Your motor skills become diminished. Your higher reasoning, your executive functions become diminished. It makes it harder to make decisions. You're more emotional. Your physical skills are impacted. Your reaction times are worse. Your ability to retain information and to think creatively are all impacted by poor sleep. Then, if you have what's called sleep apnea, which is the number one thing that disrupts people's sleep at night, it's your breathing is being restricted. And so the way we work is we have muscle tissue that's stiff and rigid in the airway while you're awake, because you have electricity You have an electrical current generated by your brain that's running through that soft tissue that holds your airway open. When you fall asleep, we relax, so our body goes into a state of relax. And so that airway, that tissue doesn't have as much of a current running through it. And so it relaxes and it gets loose. And so when you're taking in that ruach, you're breathing in and it causes tissue to vibrate. That's what creates the snoring sound. Periodically, you can collapse so much that it forms a wall of tissue blocking the flow of the ruach, of the breath, of the air that you're breathing. It blocks the flow that goes to your lungs. So the way it's supposed to happen is as you're breathing, your lungs inflate with oxygen, then the heart pumps blood into the lungs. It picks up that oxygen and sends oxygenated blood to the rest of your body. That's what makes you function at your maximum capacity. Well, if your breathing is being restricted while you're trying to rest, then what happens is the lungs are not inflating with oxygen. So the heart pumps blood in there and it looks around and it goes, there's not enough oxygen in here. I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to be more productive. And so your heart will pump faster and faster and faster to try and make up the difference. Well, that's overstressing the heart. That's being too productive. That's the wrong kind of workout for the heart. And so that is why poor sleep and poor breathing leads to strokes and heart attacks, migraines, and all kinds of other problems down the road. And so that's what I do for professional living, is help people assess what's going on with their sleep, what's causing it, and then can we provide interventions to help people get back to sleeping properly so that your metabolism picks up, so that your ability to be creative is engaged, so that your critical thinking skills are higher, so that your muscle and recovery times are better. And there's a whole host of things that are impacted by our sleep and our breathing. And I found it completely fascinating when I was first learning all of this as a believer. And I will freely admit that I have a deep affinity for the text of Genesis. I found it fascinating that one of the key components of our human biology is connected to two things: Sabbath and breath. And when you read the book of Genesis, chapter 1, the key components that move through the story of Genesis is Sabbath and spirit, ruach, breath. It like gives me chill bumps. God has built into your very being the reality of his presence and how we are to move and to focus and live our lives. Here's an interesting question. There was a survey done in Canada a few years ago where they asked people what are their biggest concerns. And the survey returned this: more than money, their health, or their children, Canadians were worried about time. Think about the phrases we use referencing time. Time is ticking. Time is money. Time flies. Running out of time. We have all kinds of ways that we refer to time. I don't have enough time. If I just had more time, I could get this done. And we have a relationship to time that, if we pay attention to the language and the way we talk about time, it tells a story about how we're relating to reality. And it tells a story about really ultimately where we've been placing our trust. And have you noticed, whenever you are rushed or hurried, or you're in a story where you don't have enough time, pay attention to your body, pay attention to your breathing. Have you ever noticed when someone's anxious, if you're ministers in the class, that you've had to minister with someone going through the middle of a tragedy or through a difficult traumatic situation, what's the thing we do if they're kind of in a panic state? We sit them down and we say, hey, just breathe. Just slow your breath and just breathe. There's something about the human body that responds to the need, that recognizes we were meant for a slower, deep breathing way of being in reality. But we live in a world that is constantly hurrying us up. Do more, push harder, win more souls, teach more Bible studies, get this done. God is coming soon. Hurry, 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 hurry. And we often don't pay attention to how the world around us is actually shaping us in its image. I have a type 1 diabetic son. This is not an anti-technology talk here. 100 years ago, my son would probably not have survived to be 21 years old. But thanks to advancements in technology, he can live a long, functioning, healthy life, even though his pancreas does not work and does not produce insulin. We have technology that helps that. So this is not anti-technology, but it is a call for us to think about how our technology shapes us. Think about the car, for instance. When the car was invented, it allowed human beings to travel at an incredible pace. I would bet there's no one in this class who can run 70 miles an hour. And if you can, it's probably for 3 seconds at the most. I doubt, I don't even know, I haven't even looked up, Googled like how fast Usain Bolt can actually run. I would be surprised if he can hit 70 miles an hour. We weren't meant to travel that fast. Our bodies were not meant to go that fast. But we developed technology that allowed us to move faster than we are humanly capable of moving. But we don't think about what that does to us. Have you ever noticed how being in a car can make you way more anxious than going for a walk? Even if traffic's not that bad, I get irritated at just a few people on the highway, way more than I do if I'm out for a walk. Think about our fast food. Forget the health factor. Let's say the fast food place you're going to is all healthy food. There's something else that's being done to you and said about you just that I go to the fast food place because you know what? I'm hungry. When should I eat? As fast as possible. Think about how it shapes us and it speeds us up. Think about how annoyed I get when the service isn't as quick or as efficient or as expedient as I think it should be. We don't think about how our ability to fast cook food and have a meal ready has reshaped us and made us into a more anxious people. In the ancient Near East and even in the biblical times of Jesus and the disciples, a meal was a big deal. It took a lot of time and energy and effort to prepare a meal. So sharing a meal was a big deal. I was reflecting the other day. I wonder how many like big all-day affair meals we cook in our lives. And I think it probably, for most people, it comes down to 2, maybe 3, 5 at the most. Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, maybe Easter, a wedding, maybe. Even that is now catered and handled by somebody else. We outsource that. We just have lost in our technological advancements. One thing that's been lost is the ability to live at the pace in which we were created. And how does that shape our efforts from a missional standpoint? We don't talk about driving in the Spirit. We don't fly in the Spirit. We walk in the Spirit. We want to learn how to move at a pace that reflects who God is and the pace at which He's moving. There's a great book by a Japanese writer called A 3 Mile Per Hour God. And one of the major premise of the book is perhaps if we want to catch up to God, we need to slow down and move at His pace. Fascinating thing about the Gospels is time and time again, Jesus, in the midst of a active ministry, slowed down, withdrew, and took time to rest. So while it's true that the accounts in the Gospel of Jesus withdrawing, when you read through the Gospels, the accounts serve a literary purpose. And those purposes will often be highlighting a strategic decision that's advancing His purposes. But I think there's something more that's going on with Jesus's habit of withdrawal. It's much more deeply rooted in identity. One of my favorite authors is Abraham Joshua Heschel. I highly recommend his book on the Sabbath. He makes this statement: the mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth have been established, God would create a holy place, a holy mountain, or a holy spring, whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Yet it seems as if to the Bible it is holiness in time, the Sabbath, which comes first. When we think about the Spirit and an apostolic understanding of the Spirit of God, we want to be filled with the Spirit. We want to be empowered by the Spirit of God. We want to be engaged with His Spirit. It is His Spirit that is the earnestness of our inheritance. It's His Spirit that washes and cleanses. It's the Spirit of God that is within me that moves me to action. Eugene Peterson made this statement in his book, The Contemplative Pastor, and I think it applies it across the board to disciples in general. He made this statement. I'm going to read. I want to cultivate my relationship with God. I want all of life to be intimate, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, with the God who made, directs, and loves me. And I want to awaken others to the nature and centrality of prayer. I want to be a person in this community to whom others can come without hesitation, without wondering if it is appropriate, to get direction in prayer and praying. I want to do the original work of being in deepening conversation with the God who reveals Himself to me and addresses me by name. I don't want to dispense mimeographed handouts that describe God's business. I want to witness out of my own experience. I don't want to live as a parasite on the first-hand spiritual life of others, but to be personally involved with all my senses, tasting and seeing that the Lord is good. I know it takes time to develop a life of prayer. Set aside, disciplined, deliberate time. It isn't accomplished on the run, nor by offering prayers from a pulpit or at a hospital bedside. I know I can't be busy and pray at the same time. I can be active and pray. I can work and pray, but I cannot be busy and pray. I cannot be inwardly rushed, distracted, or dispersed. In order to pray, I have to be paying more attention to God than to what people are saying to me, to God than to my clamoring ego. Usually, for that to happen, there must be a deliberate withdrawal from the noise of the day, a disciplined detachment from the insatiable self. Breath and rest. Breath and rest. We focus a lot on Christ's words, on His miracles, His actions, but an area we often pass over is how well He listened. As disciples, we want to have the energy and time to really listen to others so that when they're through, they know at least one other person has some inkling of what they're feeling and thinking. Listening is in short supply in the world today. People aren't used to being listened to. I know how easy it is to avoid the tough, intense work of listening by being busy. As when I let a hospital patient know that there are 10 more people I have to see. Have to? I'm not indispensable to any of them, and I'm here with this one. Too much of life is punching the clock, assuring people we're on the job, being busy, earning our pay. Christlike listening, spiritual listening, spirit-led listening requires unhurried leisure, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Leisure is a quality of spirit, not a quantity of time. It's interesting that we have advancements in technology that were supposed to create more leisure time, and yet we're more anxious and busy than ever. It's only in that ambiance of leisure, true leisure, do persons know they are listened to with absolute seriousness, treated with dignity and importance. Speaking to people does not have the same personal intensity as listening to them. The question I put to myself is not how many people have you spoken to about Christ this week, but how many people have you listened to in Christ this week? The number of persons listened to must necessarily be less than the number spoken to. Listening to a story always takes more time than delivering a message. I must discard my compulsion to count, to compile the statistics that will justify my existence. We have a few days surrounding Jesus' birth. We have a day or so of him at the age of 12 in the synagogue. We have a flurry of activity in the Gospels the last 1 to 3 years. There's far more silence than there is spoken. Perhaps this is what we should be longing for. Silent solitude in the presence of God. We say, "Give me the power," while he says, "Give me your presence." But there's an even deeper reason why Jesus routinely took time to rest. Because he was God. And from the beginning, God rests. Let that sink in a minute. God rested to be with humanity, to walk with Adam and Eve in the garden. God took time to cease and desist and rest so that he could be present with his children. I'm going to move ahead here. God has given each of us the greatest gift. It doesn't matter what your economic status is or what your social status might be. It's not hindered by your geographical location, your family of origin, or your intellectual capacity. Doesn't matter your heritage. It is universally given. And as long as you are breathing, you have time. Time is not ticking. Time is not running out. Time is not fleeting. Time is on your side. Because in the space of one moment with him, everything can change. Addictions are removed. Drunks become sober. A trajectory of a life of despair and hopelessness and destruction finds hope and life and relationship and love and joy and peace in the space of one small moment with him. He can do more than all of our combined technologies and human advancements through all of human history have done. The interesting thing about the word Shabbat, Sabbath, is it doesn't just mean rest. There's a built in component. It means to cease, to desist, to stop. It's an act of resistance. It's subversive. It cuts against the grain of spiritually rebellious culture to go, no, I am not going to be defined by who or what I produce or how much I produce. I am instead going to be defined by in whose hand I rest. Philosopher of technology Albert Borgman crafted these affirmations as a reflection of a Christ-like life. I printed out a card with these on them and I keep them beside my bed because this is something I struggle with. I'm a goer and a doer, and I have a hard time slowing down. It's a real act of discipline, and it's an ongoing spiritual formation piece for my life. But he has these 4 affirmations. There is no place I would rather be. There is nothing I would rather do. There is no one I would rather be with. This I will remember well. If I was in a crowd with everyone, if we were in a room together, I would ask the question by a show of hands, who would like to have more moments in your life where these 4 things could be true? In the rooms that I've done this, I've never had a hand not go up. And the follow-up question is this. Have you ever experienced all of these things, these 4 things? Could you say these 4 things were true in a moment of hurriedness or a moment of being rushed? I would hazard a guess that the answer to that is no. There is a subtle lie we tell ourselves. If it's going to be, it's up to me. I have to save the world. I have to win every soul. I have to teach all the Bible studies. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to produce. If we're not careful, we can engage in idolatrous behavior while trying to fulfill the mission we're called to. Our primary calling is to be Christ-like, to be filled with the Spirit. And when you look at the life of Christ, you see him constantly, repeatedly, and habitually taking time to withdraw, find solitude, and rest. That is where our true strength should come from, not from all that we do, but from the times we spend in withdrawal and rest. And there's something about a person who's filled with the Spirit that has a patient confidence that they can step into a traumatic, panicked moment and they just bring a breath of fresh spirit with them. My pastor, Lee Jackson, passed away a year ago. I can remember when my 21-year-old son was about 18 months old, and he'd running a fever, crying all night. It was a long night. We went into his room and in the morning, and he was laying in bed and his body was covered in bruises. Called the doctor. They told us immediately take him straight to Cardinal Glennon Hospital, and they sent us straight to the cancer ward because on the surface it appeared that he had all of the hallmarks potentially of leukemia at 18 months. I remember being a father, knowing that there are no guarantees in this life. It is appointed unto man once to die. And while I had faith that God could heal, and while I had faith that God could do what only God could do, I also knew that sometimes God does not heal. And my wife and I were in a state of fear, worry, panic, and we're sitting in the hospital room with a broken child, worried. And my pastor walked into the room, and he brought with him a quiet confidence of a man who spent time in prayer. And so my encouragement to you, when we think about the Spirit of God, I would hope that it calls us to withdrawal and rest, to be like Christ, and let that rest and withdrawal be the power that engages and moves you on the mission of Christ. God bless you.